So Joe Biden has made uniting Europe over Russia's war in Ukraine a top priority. How's he doing? Your thoughts on what we just heard?
I think it's a fairly strong statement. It cannot be viewed, I think, any other way than a political statement directed at Vladimir Putin, aimed at persuading the Russian president that the Ukraine war was a mistake, at least in as much as if his purpose was to weaken NATO, then here we see that it's strengthening NATO. What that means is, practically speaking, is a more complex discussion.
And talk to us about both leaders from Sweden and Finland referring to the fact that Turkey could scupper this process that we are watching unfold in front of us, and that behind the scenes some kind of talks or negotiations about security are continuing. Your thoughts on how that might change this scene of unity that we are watching in Washington?
Well, accession to NATO needs to be unanimous, and so Turkey has an opportunity to leverage some advantage here vis-a-vis its dissatisfactions with both countries hosting of PKK presences, which they would argue are political. Erdogan in general has a beef with the West. He's not so happy at the fact that the European Union has been so unwelcoming to him, and at this point is basically hostile in terms of his authoritarian nature at home. It may be also that he just enjoys presenting the profile of such a difficult and tough character on a world stage.
And Russia's view is obviously of paramount focus right now. The ministry had said, I want to get the exact words, that Russia will be forced to take retaliatory steps, both of a military, technical and other nature, in order to stop the threats to its national security arising in this regard. This was in recent days. If Vladimir Putin and Moscow are watching what we just saw in the White House right now, what kind of reaction is viable given this show of unity right now with NATO allies and potential new allies to NATO?
I would discount Putin's threats, and I think, at the baseline level, he's threatening cyber attacks on both countries and on NATO in general. To the extent that this is a political statement meant to deter Putin, I'm not completely convinced that Putin is sufficiently a rational player at this point to be deterred. Nor would I expect Putin to concede any error in terms of the overall strategy of invading Ukraine. His persona and his political position in Russia is not generally one in which he projects philosophical dialectic and open discourse.
So talk to us about how you see things unfolding in terms of what is happening on the ground, because we are seeing very disturbing images coming out of Ukraine still in terms of Mariupol. We are not exactly sure about where the troops are going. There seems to be conflicting reports and questions about exactly what is unfolding. While this is happening and NATO is discussing an application process that could take a while, what is likely to unfold in the coming weeks? And I do acknowledge it is difficult to assess.
It's impossible to assess. No one knows what's in the mind of Putin. But it looks like they're currently going for territorial gains in the east. Their military performance has not been stellar. They can always ramp it up by, creating more atrocities on the ground. And I think we're in a truly extraordinary moment where Putin has persuaded the world to be a little bit cowed by the potential that he uses nukes. And this is unbelievable. Soviet Union never did such a thing. No one really has ultimate wisdom about how to deal with such a situation. But for sure, if the West allows itself to be paralyzed by this fear, then we would be looking at a series of Munich moments and a host of Chamberlains across the European Union. And no one's comfortable with that, because there is the sense that appeasing a dictator is not the path to success and peace in the world.
An attack on one is an attack against all. We just heard that from President Joe Biden. We'll be watching to see exactly how things unfold with this accession plan for Sweden and for Finland. One of the many top stories we are covering right now on I24 News. Dan, stay with us. We've got more to discuss because we're now going local. It's another major setback for the Israeli coalition on this day. Another lawmaker is leaving, reducing it to a minority in parliament and bringing it to the brink of collapse. Gaida Renawi Zouabi from the left-wing Meretz Party announcing in recent hours that she is quitting the ruling coalition, claiming the current Israeli government has failed to address the needs of the Arab minority in the country. She is also accusing the leadership of hawkish positions on flashpoint issues, including the recent violence on the Temple Mount. Zouabi also mentioning Israeli police conduct during the funeral of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh as a breaking point. Now, her exit means the ruling coalition is down to 59 members, too short of the 61 majority they enjoyed in early April before the resignation of lawmaker Idit Silman from the right-wing Yamina party. So still in studio with me, Dan Perry. And Dan, it's not even a year since that historic photograph that the whole country looked at, Naftali Bennett, Yair Lapid and Mansour Abbas shaking hands, talking about the birth of this new coalition. What do you make of what is unfolding right now in terms of this announcement, hot on the heels of the one from Idit Silman, one from the right, one from the left?
That both the right and the left are not particularly happy with the coalition, and that was always going to be the case because it is a coalition of contradictions. The question is whether either side will keep its eye on the prize, which is keeping the classic right and Benjamin Netanyahu out of power. If at any moment either side, members of the right or members of the left, allow their annoyance with a particular quotidian dissatisfaction to overwhelm their overall strategy of trying to keep Netanyahu out of power, then you have trouble. And we're seeing different versions of that from the right and from the left. It is difficult to believe that Zouabi would bring down a government. There are two distinct stages here. One is to leave the coalition. The other is to join the opposition. In Israel, you cannot bring down a government without a majority vote of 61 that is constructive, meaning this highly left-wing Israeli Arab lawmaker would have to actually vote for Benjamin Netanyahu to become prime minister for this to have a practical effect of bringing down Bennett and Lapid. I don't really see that happening, but a good sign, it is not.
She is set to meet with Nitzan Horowitz, the party leader, only tomorrow. Explain to people who have seen 4 elections in the space of 2 years how it's possible that another one could be happening and what kind of announcement would happen. How would the country even hear that this is the next step for the country, another election very soon?
For that to happen, a movement probably led by Likud would have to actually get people like Zouabi to actively vote in favor of a motion to dissolve the Knesset. That could happen. If her dissatisfaction has become so overwhelming, I suppose it's technically possible for her to do this. But there are many, many other scenarios, including her leaving the Knesset. She said that she can no longer stand to be part of a coalition that is complicit in events like the fiasco at Shireen Abu Akleh's funeral on Friday, where police beat mourners. Okay, if she can't stand it, she can resign from the Knesset, and the next person in line to take her place from the Meretz party probably will find themselves able to stand it. Another option, by the way, is a little bit more utilitarian and perhaps cynical. She was meant to be the consul general in Shanghai.
Right.
That appointment has been delayed, and cynics in Israel might suspect that this is an attempt to speed that up. She headed that off by writing in her letter that this is not about any other appointment, and her candidacies are removed. But if you believe that, I do have a used car to sell.
And Likud opposition, led of course by Benjamin Netanyahu, what is he meeting about as we speak in terms of the next steps to make sure that this parliament is dissolved?
Oh, Netanyahu has to constantly show momentum. And
he is good at that.
He's the best in the world at this, not just in Israel. So the message has to be to all the various potential rebels in the coalition ranks that you better join me now, because the first ones to join me will receive various little prizes, and the last will receive an end to their political career because it will no longer be needed. And there are certain people, in particular in the Yamina party and in the New Hope party of Gideon Sa'ar, who are in the crosshairs of the Likud, and no matter how much they may protest that they're loyal to Bennett and Lapid, nothing, I mean, disloyalty is the most consistent thing in Israeli politics, I fear. They're always going to be suspect.
In fairness, in most politics, I think pretty much around the globe.
Israel's high up there.
It's pretty much high up there. We certainly are going to be watching to see exactly what unfolds, and we always appreciate your insight. International Affairs Analyst Dan Perry, the former Middle East editor at Associated Press and former chairman at the Foreign Press Association. Thank you for being here for all the top stories unfolding on this day, both locally and abroad.